So for today's oil change, I have a drain pan with a 6 litre capacity, which is approximately the same as the engine's oil capacity. So that should take all the oil once it's all drained out. Have a oil filter wrench, which will go around the oil filter, the old one, to get it out, and it just uses a 1/2 inch square drive on the end of a socket wrench. I've got a 15mm socket on the end of that wrench for the sump nut itself, replacement crush washers for the sump nut, 2 5 litre bottles of 20 W50 Valvoline, and the oil filter itself. Capacity is actually only about 6 litres, but you can only generally buy oil in 1 litre or 5 litre containers, and since I was a bit worried that 6 might not quite be enough, and it's always useful to have a little bit extra, I ended up buying 2 5. So one of the nice things about working on the old chassis Land Rovers, including the P38, is that you can get underneath them relatively easily. So I'm going to try and do this job today without even actually jacking the car up. I think I'll get away with it. You can just see the sump plug drain nut there, which I'm going to get off in a moment, and then the oil filter slightly further forward here is just there. Now, the reason I've used a relatively long fixed wrench rather than a ratchet is because my preferred method is to use a long bar to undo the nut, because it's often very tight, and then just take the nut off by hand once it's been loosened. I mean, you could put a ratchet on there if you wanted to, but I just find it easier to do it with my fingers under here, and you just got to be slightly careful not to get burnt with the hot oil when it comes out. So as you can see, this oil filter strap, this is a metal one, you can get fabric ones as well, just goes around the bottom of the filter like that, and then you've got your square drive on the outside where to put the wrench, and then you just very slowly move it in a anti-clockwise direction, and just only need just a little bit of movement, and then once loose enough you can just do the last few turns by hand. So I've just dumped the old filter in the pan there with all the rest of the oil. As you can see, oil everywhere, even using the pan, so I'm obviously very glad I put the blanket down here. New one, you just go on by hand, and provided one's fingers aren't too oily, you should be able to get that tight enough just using finger torque. So get it on the thread. It's pretty obvious once the old one's removed how to attach it, and then just get it reasonably tight in there. It doesn't have to be super tight, it'll seal itself once it's all on there. Some people say to put a thing of oil, or soak it in oil or whatever, before putting it on, or put oil around the gasket or something like that. I have to admit I haven't done that on this occasion, but I don't think it's super critical. It'll soon fill with oil once the engine's running. So when the kit first arrived, I was slightly mystified as to why there appeared to be two crush washers for the sump plug nut. Now, what was on the car is this longer nut and this silver, I guess, aluminium washer was on it. Now, having done a bit of research, it appears that slightly later cars, probably from about mid 99 onwards, so mine is on the VIN there, it's XA429, come with this longer nut, with which one is apparently supposed to use the silver rather than the, I think, copper smaller ring. So that solves that one, so I will use the silver one when putting the nut back in. Now, I don't know if this is actually a crush washer or not. but either way it's always recommended to put a new washer on the sump nut when reinstalling it, so that's what I'm going to do. And this is why it's always good to have the workshop manual from your car. As you can see here under the torque value section, the sump drain plug V8 petrol from 99 model year is actually 32 Newton meters or 24 foot-pounds, whereas previously it was 45 Newton meters and 33. So I'm glad I checked that, because I wouldn't want to over torque it obviously. So I'll set 32 Newton meters, 24 foot-pounds on my torque wrench, because the car is a 99 model year. So obviously the correct torque on this 1/2-inch square drive torque wrench I've got from Halfords years ago. It's a good wrench actually. It's right, that figure though is right at the lower end of what I can set on this. So I've just set approximately what I think it should be, and obviously I won't go any higher than that. So the new filter has been installed, the sump plug nut has been reinstalled with a new washer and torqued to the correct value. The next stage is just to fill it up with oil. So I'm going to remove the filler cap here. You might want to use a funnel, but I don't want to get my funnel, which I generally use for other things, covered in oil. It's a nice wide neck on the top of the filler here, so if I'm careful, there's no reason why I can't just pour that oil straight in. Oh yeah, gently pouring the new oil. So remember to put the cap back on. I know it sounds silly, but I've known people who haven't, and you don't want oil coming out through the filler cap with the engine running. It causes absolute mess. Just run the engine for a little bit just to get the new oil all circulating round, and then you can check turn it off and check the dipstick. So it sounds silly, but just a quick check underneath, make sure nothing's sort of obviously leaking. Sump plug nut looks clean. New oil filter looks alright. So obviously there is a bit of sort of general oil leakage under the car probably from the transmission and engine seal and other places as well. They're not excessive. I think most Rover V8s of this age have them. And once the engine's been run a bit, take the dipstick out, give it a bit of a wipe, put it back in, now quite often when you've done an oil change, you find that it's actually quite difficult to see the oil on the dipstick because it's so thin and hasn't yet picked up any dirt, but you can just see there we've got oil pretty much up to the full level, possibly just above it. Right, so all that remains now is to tidy up. Before leaving the job, it's a good idea just to go over mentally that everything's back in its place. So the sump plug nut is back in with a new washer. It's all torqued up correctly. The oil filter has been replaced. The engine has been run for several minutes and the oil level has been checked again. So now all that remains to be done is dispose of 6 litres of old oil and the old filter and tidy all the tools away. So just with the oil, what I'll do with that, I'm going to put it in a container with a screw top so that I can take it down to the household waste recycling centre where they have a safe disposal service.